Okay, well, apparently there's not another session during this time period. So, welcome everybody. I am gratified that we are so well attended at this point. I think this is a really important topic. It's certainly important to us. I'm part of Appian CS, which is the services organization at Appian. And we are primarily a product company. So, even from a services standpoint, what we're most interested in is our customers getting the most out of the platform, the product itself that they can. And, where it makes sense for our customers to develop a strong in-house Appian practice, where that makes sense for them from a business standpoint, that's something that we, take very seriously and want to be able to support. And so that's part of the reason we're having this discussion today. So we have a panel, and our panelists here represent a variety of different Appian practices, ranging from a large practice that has a COE that's presiding over multiple teams that are doing multiple projects for multiple departments, to a one-team practice that supports an organization in terms of all of the kinds of applications that Appian can help with one team, but it is a team that has been successfully doing an in-house practice for a long period of time. And then our third panelist built an Appian practice in-house from scratch at a previous organization and had to scale that, and is now in a new organization, starting all over again and building the practice based on lessons learned from where they had been before. So we've got a lot of different variety of perspectives and experiences here. This isn't the kind of thing where there is a one way to establish an in-house Appian practice. So that's part of the reason why we thought a discussion would be the best way to begin this. So what I'm going to do to start with is just we're going to do quick introductions. I'm Russ Bailey. I am a director at Appian CS. I've been at Appian since 2015 and been part of CS that whole time. And then I'm going to let each of our panelists introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about what Appian does for your organization.
Sure. So hi, I'm Dylan Fulmer. I run product management for internal tools at 3E. We are, as Russ mentioned, we're getting our team started right now. We've been using Appian. We signed our Appian contract last fall, and we're just getting started at 3E. So.
Okay.
And I'm Pete Horning. I am a senior manager who oversees workflow services for our Vanguard Corporate Services division, as well as an Appian COE for the enterprise. And I started my Appian journey back in 2008 as a consultant, and I've worked for several companies before landing at Vanguard 4.5 years ago. We've got a pretty large, mature practice with several different Appian shops across our lines of business, 23 teams, 75 developers, something like that.
And that's all been since 2018 that you guys have expanded that size, right?
Yeah, it's grown quickly.
By the way, all of our panelists today have been Appian developers for almost a decade, isn't that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're talking a lot of experience in the room. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Taylor Smith. I am the Appian development lead at LIUNA, which is the Labor's International Union. We have about 500,000 members that do things like building highways, bridges, mega projects. I don't do anything like that. I have a team of about 5 that builds Appian apps. And we're a mature team that's been doing it roughly 10 years now.
Okay, so the first question I have for you guys, and what we're going to do just logistically is, I've got a series of questions. We may not get to all of them. We do want this to be participatory. So if you have questions, we do have some mic runners, so you can just raise your hand and we'll get a mic to you. And feel free to ask questions as we go. What we're going to do is start with a couple of questions to just kind of establish, the context, and then we're going to talk about, the elements of establishing an Appian practice in terms of, the important concepts related to teams and how they work, related to individuals and how they acquire the skills that are necessary and retain those skills, and in terms of the methodology that makes sense for working in Appian and how that may be different from the methodology for working with another technology. So we'll have a couple of questions around each one of these, and before we move on to each, from each section, I'll ask if there are any further questions related to these dynamics. The whole point here is that when we're talking about establishing a practice, we're not just limited to talking about, finding some developers with some development skills and then familiarizing them with the features of the platform. That isn't enough to actually establish an ongoing practice that can, there's a whole lot more to that, and we're going to cover that today. So, so that's just kind of the logistic piece of this. And where I'd like to start with is, if all three of you can talk about why, with the various options you had available to you, did you decide that it was important to, commit to the investment in time and materials and people and cost to establish an in-house practice? So Pete, let's go ahead and start with you.
Sure. Yeah, I think to answer this question, I need to give you a little Horning family history. So my wife and I have been married for 15 years, and we knew early on that we wanted to start a family, but we didn't start with kids. We started with the houseplant, right? And we made sure that we kept it alive, and then we got a dog, and now I have 3 kids in a minivan. And so in a similar fashion, that's how Appian started at Vanguard. So the first 2 Appian programs were replacing, modernizing very large legacy apps. But we didn't start there. We started with kind of a small application that we built. And then from there, and what that allowed us to do is basically get our feet wet with Appian. The app is actually not even active anymore. We retired it, but we were able to learn Appian. They were able to learn us. And then we jumped right into kind of a 5-year program to modernize a legacy app. So if you have an IRA or some other investment vehicle with Appian and you've ever submitted a change of ownership request or a name change or an address change, you probably created a ticket in Appian at Vanguard. So I'm glad that we made the decision to go in-house, because that is critical to our business function. And so we wanted that business expertise and product ownership that employees offer. And it's scaled quite a bit since then, so it's nice to have that Vanguard level ownership as Appian has grown.
Okay, Taylor, you guys started back, was it in 2015?
2012.
2012. Okay, so it's been a while. And what made you guys decide to do this in-house?
So there were a few reasons, and just to throw it out there right away, we're a small business effectively, so cost was a major factor. You look at when you're partnering, you've got that initial engagement cost, you've got O&M afterwards, and assuming everything goes well, then where do you go next? You're signing another contract for future development. So that was a big factor for us. The second one is we did have an in-house development team, just everybody was used to using our old legacy out-of-date system. So we went and we had people with institutional knowledge. So rather than starting from scratch, we were able to leverage them, teach them a new technology. They know our users, they know our style, they know our exceptions to the exceptions that exist. So that was a big help. And the final one is agility and flexibility. I think a lot of the times for big engagements, you've got 100-page documents that everybody's looking through. You've got change request forms. Sometimes you have to slot things into builds, get the deployment, the testing, everything. We can often have somebody just swing by an office and we'll have the request done in production the same day. Appian makes that pretty easy.
Okay, and Dylan, I mean, you did this once.
Yep.
And you're telling me you're ready to do it again?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, and so primarily, it's a couple of things. One that you mentioned and one, Taylor, that you mentioned. The primary reason that we're building an in-house Appian practice is to extract the most value out of our Appian investment possible. It's Appian, as customers know, is not cheap, and so we want it to be considered valuable and not expensive. And so the flexibility, as Taylor mentioned, that having an in-house Appian team brings us, allows us to pivot, change directions. If something doesn't work, we don't have to cite a whole new SOW with another partner or something like that. So that's primarily why we're trying to demonstrate the value of our investment.
Okay, and then in terms of how you're starting your practice at 3E,
Yep.
What are the kind of essential elements, the things that you are thinking are really important to include
Yes.
this time around?
So, obviously, having professional Appian developers as part of the team is a very essential part of that. And I've been lucky that I've been able to continue working with some of the developers that I've worked with in the past as part of my new practice at 3E. Very beneficial in that regard. So I've had some continuity of working with some of the same people that I was working with previously. So we are starting anew at 3E. Like I said, we signed our Appian contract last fall, and we're working on a couple of different engagements right now. And that's, having that in-house team is definitely beneficial.
And in your case, the case management solution
Yes.
is something that is an important part of what you're doing.
Correct.
Can you talk a little bit about why that is?
Yeah, I mean, case management for us, my last experience, the last company that I worked with that we used Appian, we had a sort of configurable workflow platform that we built on top of Appian. And so I am accustomed to having that sort of solution. And so we wanted to build something like that, and we're going to be using case management instead of building something ourselves.
Okay, and Pete, same question to you.
Yeah,
The question is, how did you start
Oh yeah, right.
the Appian practice? When you first started off, how did you kind of approach the problem of doing the in-house practice?
Yeah, when we started, I mentioned that we started small and grew it. I think that's really important for success. But in terms of team structure, we started with an Appian customer success pod, a team, and then slowly kind of embedded Vanguard employees onto that team and scaled down our dependence on customer success. And I think that was important because rather than just let's build something awesome with CS and then just jump over to employees, we needed to transition slowly to make sure that we got smart on Appian. So we did things like we sent our employees to Appian training so that they could get smart quickly. We took our time to build that Appian expertise.
So, I mean, in terms of our own experience working with customers who want to enable, in-house teams, we consistently come up against this kind of problem where, to the degree that we're enabling the in-house team, we are slowing down in terms of delivery, in terms of the velocity and the amount of stuff that we can produce for production. And to the degree that we're speeding up and focusing on productivity, we're kind of leaving the enablement behind. Is that something that I see you shaking your head like you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I mean, you do need to be patient early on. That large program that I mentioned, it was a 4-year program. It ended up taking us 5 years. And I think it was a good investment, but don't rush it early on. Give yourself time to learn Appian as an organization. Give Appian a chance to learn you as an organization. Build up that expertise over time. And what you'll find is as you grow that in-house practice, you can rely less and less on Appian CS because you have people who, whether it's a center of excellence or even just teams who can help other teams, you'll get to the point where you really can go quickly.
And Taylor, when you guys started, you also started with CS, right? And
Right.
you had the CS team and your in-house team kind of working on separate business cases. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So we're working separately and together with CS. And for us, it was kind of critical, especially coming with a team that had not worked with Appian before. Having the CS team there, it was kind of a safety net where you could bounce ideas off them. You would make sure that you're not going too far down the wrong path. For us, getting the security model right in the beginning was critical. And we're now 10, 12 years later, we're still basically using that same security model. So it really does give you that confidence boost. And it also builds up a large base of examples that you can go off of. Sometimes you're just not sure how to attack something, but you have a big knowledge base to go through, and it's, you're owning the code at that point, so you can do whatever you want with it.
And your own team that was like enabling in parallel, it was working on a different use case?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
to get our feet wet, we started with just a small internal app for time off tracking. Meanwhile, the Appian CS team was building the foundation of our core, similar to Pete. We had a four-year plan to get our large core application out. So Appian CS started on that, and they handed it over probably after the first year and a half, 2 years, and we took it from there to finish it and actually get it deployed.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you had the critical use case in both of your cases. You had a critical use case, you used Appian CS for that critical use case. I'm assuming there were deadlines, we need to have this done and in production by October for that kind of thing.
The good thing about our organization is deadlines aren't much of a thing, so
Oh,
we
well,
can take
there
our
you go.
time to do what we need to do,
Yeah.
which really helps with the stress.
And
so.
where can the people apply for a job at your
Yeah, I know.
Well, so where I was going with this is that, you know, for the difference between the delivery and the enablement is if you've got something that has to be in production by a certain time with a certain scope done, you're really not talking about enablement. You're talking about focusing on productivity and delivery. And where you want to seriously enable a team, if you can find a use case where there's a little bit more flexibility because the team doesn't know how fast they're going to work, how fast they're going to deliver, and as they become enabled, that's going to change over time. You know, that's not always something you can find, but it's certainly a preferable thing when you can. All right. Okay, so now we're going to go into some questions about teams in particular. And can you tell me about, Dylan, in terms of your, if you want to talk about in terms of your past organization or history, or if you want to talk about what you're planning on doing. I'm going to go ahead and start with Taylor again. Can you tell us how your team was structured at the beginning, and you know, has that evolved over time, or how has it changed over time?
So we've been fortunate that our team has been pretty consistent throughout. Part of that is, you know, we're a union, so we do have good benefits. We have good pay scales and everything.
Again, where can people
Yep.
apply for that?
So people tend to be there for, you know, either less than a year or 25 years, which means you don't have to deal with a lot of turnover. You know, the time you're investing into someone, you're going to get it back out.
Yeah.
So our team has been fairly consistent with, we've grown to, you know, 5 developers from 3 just because of the number of departments and apps we have to support. We organize it so that individual developers will support individual departments within the organization. They get to know those users even closer, better. They become the SME essentially for each group, and that helps us a lot with efficiency.
And so you haven't had any issues with you know, people being poached away after they get skilled at Appian?
Not so much. I've been pretty lucky with it. Yeah.
All right, that's good. Pete, what about your experience? I think you guys have had a lot more evolution in terms of where you started and where you are now.
Yeah, we definitely have. I mean, we started in 2018 with the one team, one program. At this point, we have 10 different Appian shops across our lines of business. And each one of those kind of delivery organizations has one or more multiple teams. We've got 23 teams across those 10 shops and something like 75 developers at Vanguard, probably 25 who are employees and maybe another 50 who are contractors. And so it can be a little chaotic at times, right? It's complex, but we give our Vanguard Appian shops a lot of autonomy, right? Like they know their applications, they know their business. And so depending on the criticality of the application, some of them started, the most critical ones, the most complex ones started with CS and then transitioned. Others either went on their own or brought in a third party. But that target state really depends on the target state of the team structure, and how it's grown depends on the target state of the applications that we're going to host. So it's either a combination of employees and contractors, or for some of our lighter weight applications, less critical business functions, we'll go with kind of a third-party self-managed service. And each of those teams then, again, depending on the app, are structured differently. If we have a heavily integrated application, typically we'll see a cross-functional team with, you know, not just Appian skills, but a host of skills and at least 2 Appian skilled people on those teams. But for our larger Appian programs that require a dedicated Appian team, or some of our lighter weight apps that don't need to be integrated, our Appian teams we typically run with 1 tech lead, 4 to 5 developers. We like to run our teams a little bit smaller than a standard full stack team. We found that that's a good sweet spot.
Yeah, we like the team of 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Dylan, I know you guys are kind of working out your team structure now, and there's a component of that involves like a citizen developer role that you're going to be accommodating. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So, I mean, in terms of how our current team is changing, it's basically in a growth mode. It started with me. We got a couple of developers on board. And as Russ mentioned, our citizen developer strategy is very critical to our overall Appian development strategy because we need to do more with the same amount of people. We're not going to be able to hire additional people to join the team as full-time Appian developers, but I'm confident that we can get there. So the model that we have is a sort of a 3-pronged model of we have our professional Appian development team, we have citizen developers who are not full-time Appian developers, but are tech savvy, interested in learning more, things like that. And those are the people who are engaging in doing Appian development in a more consistent basis than other business users, but they also have a full-time job as well. And so we see that cohort of people sort of taking what our professional development team has been doing and integrating that with other sort of applications and also building smaller applications themselves.
And I would assume that in the case where you have people who are not full-time Appian dedicated, you've got to have some gatekeeping in terms of some of the stuff they do. So how are you addressing that?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things is that any Appian citizen developer, we're required to go through at least Appian Academy training. And only then do they get keys to our dev environment. We have a training environment that's sort of a sandbox that anybody can play. But it's only after they've been vetted basically by our team that they can start working in the development environment. And that's all they can do is work in the development environment. So all of the deployments are going to be handled by the team, our in-house professional team with code reviews and health checks and everything like that. So that's how we're handling that. But the citizen developers are trained Appian developers. They're just not doing it full time. One of our citizen developers, the reason he's not in the audience right now is he's getting his certification exam right now. So
there are some more exams going on later on too. Actually, that's going to be something we'll talk about in a little bit. But right now, so when you are looking to build teams, and we're talking now about the full-time Appian folks, have you found that there are particular characteristics of individuals that you think are indicative that they're going to be effective at Appian? Anybody who wants to take this can take it.
Yeah, I would say somebody who is intellectually curious and not sort of so rigid in their thinking. Because anybody who's worked with Appian for any period of time knows that there are quirks and idiosyncrasies and things like that, and not everything behaves the way sort of a .NET developer would expect them to and things like that. So having that curiosity and patience and understanding what they're getting into, I think is a critical role. We've had success with developers who come from .NET or Java going into Appian because they have that sort of more open mind and they can see it as an accelerator for things that they don't enjoy doing. But then there are other people who are like, well, it doesn't do it exactly the way I expect it to. And so they just sort of discard it. So,
why does Appian force me to do this a particular way? Right? To which the answer is, Appian has a value proposition that involves speed to market that you lose if you don't have some of those constraints around it. But that's a tangent. And we'll get back to the discussion here.
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
This has been a challenge for us, but I've actually learned a lot from Appian and how Appian recruits their consultants in terms of building our practices. So we have had success hiring out of college. It's easy to learn Appian. You can learn it very quickly. But rather than look for like computer engineers, we tend to look for like computer science adjacent degrees, like information sciences and technology, even economics. We've even had success hiring out of boot camps. And we were talking the other day as we were preparing, you mentioned even that Appian looks for like a minor that shows self-discipline and study, right? Like music, like violin. You can learn on your own, you can grow, and I'm gonna steal that. So thanks for the tip.
Works pretty well for us, I have to say.
Yeah, so that's it's how we've recruited. I think that's gone well. But in terms of retention and really looking and bringing in that sort of senior level Appian talent, that becomes more challenging. And the way that we've gone about that is really kind of two things. Number one, we do allow visa sponsorship at Vanguard, right? So that kind of opens the doors. If you're looking for kind of senior level talent, you can get a lot more candidates if you're able to sponsor visas. And then the second thing would be, we try to make our Appian shop as attractive as possible. And so we kind of have broken, at least in my organization, have broken the cardinal rule of you build it, you own it, and maintain it. We have a separate production support team and that handles prod support and light enhancements. So we can say, hey, you work for us, you don't have to do prod support, right? So it's a way to attract and retain people, which I don't know if I'm allowed to do this or not, but I do have a tech lead opening on my team. So I don't want anyone in this room, I don't want to poach any from companies, but Appian's a small community. So if you have friends that are interested, send them my way.
Question about that. So is your prod support team sort of the funnel into your development team as well?
No, it's not. So I've got a kind of like a technical product owner, but we basically have some characteristics. We will build an app and then after a warranty period, hand it over to that prod support team, and then they will handle production support and light enhancements. Anything that's like a extra small t-shirt size, not as complex. But then for larger requests or for new apps, that will all go through our kind of in-house team.
So you were talking about having the team be a great team to work for. Do you think that has helped you in avoiding situations with having people who train up with you guys and then go work somewhere else?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you can build a culture where people want to go to work and love to work on your team, that's going to help. And I think that's just something that's not, Vanguard's great at that. So I really enjoy that. It's been nice to see that there. But part of the reason why we look for computer science adjacent degrees is because we found when we hire like a hardcore developer out of college, we can train them on Appian and they'll do great, but then they might get frustrated with some of that. They want to be in the weeds with Java or things like that. So they might leave Vanguard, but they might rotate to another place that's doing more full stack development. So it's nice to kind of look for folks that are smart, flexible, like Dylan mentioned, but don't want to necessarily be full stack in the weeds.
I also think there's a component of this where in my time at Appian, I've seen some enablement efforts that didn't end up with the results that they were looking for. And sometimes there's this pattern where, the business will bring Appian in and then they'll be very excited about Appian. They'll give it to IT and IT will go, okay, I have this new thing. And they'll pick somebody and kind of tap them on the head and say, okay, you're going to be the Appian person, go do training. And that person is now in a position where they have to kind of work themselves and it's all on them. And generally that person in 6 months is not going to be there anymore, either because they don't like to work that way and they're struggling and they don't have anybody to reach out to and they're not part of a team, or because they happen to be really, really good and they get hired away for more money by somebody else, right? And so
or
I
they
think,
end up on stage
well,
15 years later.
that's true too. But the point is that part of retaining talent with regard to Appian is making sure that they're working in a team of people that they like to work with, and that is a thriving team, because that is kind of mutually upbuilding for everybody who's involved, right? It's the key to retention. So does anybody in the room have any questions related to the team topic? So recruiting and retention, the right kind of people to hire to do Appian, or the team structure that works? Yeah, we've got a mic over here.
I had a question on the warranty period. How long is your warranty period? And if you converted that to sprints, is it a certain number of sprints or things like that?
Yeah, it would be 30 days, 2 sprints. We do 2-week sprints. And it's not a hard and fast rule, right? Like our teams work well together. But yeah, for features that the in-house team delivers, whether it's a new app or a feature, we typically support those for 30 days and then hand them over.
And was there somebody over here? Okay.
Here you
Oh, we got one here too, and then here.
Yes, can you expound on the recruitment of computer adjacent talent from college? Because that's what we've been kind of looking into. You know, what other criteria are you looking for when you're doing that? Because it would help me in this process.
Yeah, that's a really good question. One of the things that I learned from Vanguard actually was that emotional intelligence is really important for people who can learn and be flexible, like Dylan mentioned, right? So in addition to, okay, maybe not computer engineering or, is this person willing to learn? Are they humble? Are they, right? Like, so some of those behavioral questions that every company has, I find is really important, not just for hiring someone who can grow and learn quickly, but also who will fit on the team and not try to be a maverick or cause problems. So that's a big one. In addition to, you want to make sure that they can learn quickly, right? So sometimes we'll throw like a brain teaser in or things like that to see how they think through problems. That's been helpful as well. Yeah.
And I'll just say multidisciplinary curiosity. That's the key thing.
A question about the citizen devs, and I understand the thing that we want citizen developers in order to automate and speed up the time, but we also want to keep the control of the automation in order to ensure that they have a set of quality, a set of rules, that we are not automating the same thing many times. So because of that, there is another model, which is the center of excellence, right? The question is how to mix these citizen developers with the center of excellence. Are we keeping control of everything? Are we giving the liberty to make whatever they want? How to mix those stuff?
I mean, the way I think about that is that I don't want to, as much as possible, I don't want to be a bottleneck for anything. So often, what I've seen, and I'm not, the COE concept works for a lot of people, and it works very well. But one of the things, it can be a single-threaded sort of, way to organize. And so, what I'm trying to do is to educate people as much as possible on how they can use Appian effectively, and really enable that sort of mindset. And set guardrails for, and again, like I said, we will work with anybody who's interested to do Appian development on sort of qualified projects. But they have to do that. They're not going to be able to deploy things themselves. Also, another thing is that, we might get to this later, but like when we're engaging citizen developers, there is an expectation of ownership as well. So either for maintaining an application that we are building for their group, or if it's an application that they're building themselves, the expectation is that they own that application. It really is their application. And there's a lot of reasons that we do that, but it's more, again, of that sense of ownership and that sense of like, if we want to do something for this, it's not a situation where we're sending it over the wall and expecting somebody else to do it.
Even for the applications that are not just citizen developer driven, don't you like define an owner up front who is part of the process of design and development all the way through?
Yes, exactly. So we bring people along with us bring somebody from the business along with us as we're doing application development. Mm-hmm. For a couple of different reasons. One, we want that business user to learn more about Appian so they can be more empathetic with what we're going through the project execution process, as well as being able to maintain that themselves. Because we want to keep building more and more applications, and if we're maintaining all the applications that we've just built, we're not able to build more. So
okay. All right. One more question, then we'll keep moving through. Go ahead.
Just a quick question on training and upskilling internal personnel. Do you find that the in-person training is more effective than online, or making your own internal training? Anything you can speak about that?
That was our next section, so this is really good.
Yeah, I can go right into that. I mean, for us, I think the Appian instructor training is excellent, especially if you're looking for somebody out of college. They're used to having a professor talking to them. So it kind of goes hand in hand to make that transition. But at the same time, there's no replacement for actually getting hands-on and doing the work. So if you can find that ideal small project that they can own from the very beginning, even if it's something simple like converting a paper form to an actual Appian form, and give them time to fail, to learn, for it to break, for them to fix it, and just kind of support them along the way.
Yeah, I was just going to say on that, one of the things we talk about with our initial dev training is that the goal of the dev training is to get you to project ready, so you're ready to start a project, right? But then the actual activity of doing the project is kind of what fleshes out that training. So we are running late, so we're not going to be able to get through all of our material. But I do want to ask, on the subject of when you bring new people into your teams, what's the most effective way to get them productive as quickly as possible? We've talked about the training a little bit, but are there other aspects of this to address?
Yeah, I would say, I mentioned we don't do prod support, but prod support is a great way to come up to speed quickly. It's very clear requirements. There's a bug, fix it, right? So often we'll start off a person, looking at defects, and then just like Taylor mentioned, if you have some small, even in-house project, right? Like you want to build an app to manage the apps you have or something like that. It's great to give someone that, let them learn, let them work with their other team members before you put them on some type of critical project.
Okay.
Yeah, and for us, it's mostly exposure to the business, I would say. The Appian, the sort of mechanics of building things in Appian, the syntax and everything like that, that's something that is, I would say, relatively easy to pick up for anybody for all the qualities of a person that we've been talking about. But really understanding the business problems that we're trying to solve, I think, is the really essential thing to get up to speed with, because if you don't understand that, you're going to be developing something that doesn't actually solve the problem. So.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think like coming up to speed on Appian is actually, you can do that really quickly. I know over time, but just a quick story. So I had we had an IT organization that was not an Appian shop, like just a team that built an application on Appian, and they estimated with Angular, it would have taken them 4 developers in a year, and they did it with 2 developers in 5 months. So that's like 80% cost savings, less than half the time to market, and they didn't know Appian. They just worked with our COE, got smart quickly because they were already IT professionals. So the ability for your folks to come up to speed on Appian, I think you'll be surprised at how quickly. It's more about learning the business and learning your team and learning the culture that I think is going to take time.
All right. Well, so I'm going to ask one more question as we wrap up. If you need to leave, that's fine. You can go ahead and go. I know some people have certification training that they need to get to. But final question for all 3 of you. If you were to start this over again, knowing what you know now, what would you do differently in terms of being at the beginning of your journey for setting up an in-house practice?
So we both had similar experiences where we had a small internal app and then a huge 4 to 5 year massive app. The problem with that for us is, from the outside world, it kind of looked like we went silent for 4 to 5 years, which led to a lot of questions. So if I had to do it again, we would have focused a little bit more on making sure we were, throughout that time, pushing out a little bit more quick wins, easy wins. In fact, we even had a email I dug up from the very first year we started, and it was called Easy Win, and we just pushed out that app. Actually, this week we're pushing it out. So.
Yeah, I would agree with that, right? Don't go from the house plant to the kids. And if you do, I think what worked at Vanguard is, even though we had that large program, the change management was really good, and we actually were releasing monthly to production. So we didn't wait for 4 or 5 years. We onboarded different groups and kind of built it out and built up our adoption that way. But I would say the other thing, not so much at Vanguard, but just at other companies I'd worked at, is make sure that you have a plan and a strategy for how you're going to hire and build your teams. Are you going to use employees? Are you going to use Appian CS? Are you going to go onshore, offshore? That's something, getting Appian talent can be tricky, can be challenging. So make sure you've thought through it, you've talked with people, you've used some of the best practices that we've shared today.
Yeah, the only thing I would do different is tempering my own excitement for starting the Appian practice. I get very excited about this work. It's very interesting to me. I've been doing it for a long time, and just sort of being more realistic about what we're able to accomplish in a short period of time. And because one of the things that I don't want to have is having so much demand for the type of work that we're doing and not being able to satisfy that demand. So just being more realistic about those expectations.
All right, and to wrap up, let me just say that adjacent to this whole discussion and this whole important topic, Appian CS does have a new offering called Empowerment, which is designed for us to help our clients based on the experience that we've had over a quarter of a century in CS, doing nothing but delivering Appian and improving on our process for doing so, to establish a practice that is like our practice. So if this topic is interesting to you and this is something that you're interested in pursuing, I happen to be the service line lead for Empowerment. We are at the booth at lunch, and you can follow up with me or anybody that you talk to, your TDM or AE is going to be able to answer your questions or get you to the right people to talk about that. Thank you so much for this conversation. I hope it was really beneficial for you.